we have a long day today, and as mentioned yesterday, we are basically zooming out, now moving to the second circle of the region, you know, Turkey, Iran, the Gulf. The afternoon session, we are going to go a little bit farther away, Kazakhstan, China, Turkmenistan, and so on. Since my colleagues yesterday chose to avoid lengthy introductions, I'll keep it short also. I think all of you have the bios of the participants, so I will basically only introduce the Iranian speakers because it's very awkward to have somebody on Zoom and say, keep talking, you know. So I have to say a few things about them, but about the participants here, Dr. Cengiz Aktar is a professor of political science, presently at the University of Athens, EKPA, Turkmas. He had a lengthy career at the UN and also academic career. He is very well known and a good friend. Joseph Keshishian, we met decades ago at UCLA when he was in Southern California. I was still a doctoral student. And I think it has been more or less 20 or more years that we haven't met. He worked at the RAND Corporation, and he is currently senior fellow at the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I'll introduce the Iranian scholars if they have the internet and there are no complications. At any rate, one of them recorded his talk. So even if there is a problem with the internet, you'll be able to watch Dr. Movahedian's comments. So that part at least is safe. So, without further ado, Dr. Cengiz Aktar, Turkey and the Eastern kinship. We touched upon that issue yesterday with the organization of Turkic states and so on. Ambitions versus reality.
Thank you, Stefan. Louis, bonjour, good morning. It's always good to be back. That's my 4th year at the American University, I think. And someone was asking me, when was your first time in Armenia? It was immediately after 89, actually. In 90, I came here, and this country has changed, I can tell you. So, thank you to Turpanjian Institute and the hosting institutions. I'm supposed to talk about this one of the elephants in the room. There are many elephants in the room, so that one is Turkey. And I prefer to say Turkey, and I'm not very fond of this Türkiye world, really. It's first of all, it's not Turkish. it's half Arabic and French, Italian, etc. So and only pronounceable in English, by the way. It's the other languages. It's still Turkey and Turkey, etc. So anyhow, so this the relationship of that country with the Caucasus and Central Asia. It began really with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Nothing really serious before. And prior to the establishment of the communist regime, well, both the Ottoman Empire and subsequently the Republic of Turkey maintained only very limited interactions with this huge geography, and it was always considered as very distant and quasi-mythical, the roots of the Turks. Yesterday, Varujan was mentioning the Panturanism, and well, this is really something. This Panturanism is an ideology which came and went. I mean, it didn't last at all. I mean, it was invented during the invention of the Turkish nation, and they were looking for roots and some concrete basis to create and invent a nation, and Panturanism was just one of it. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it didn't work. It remained within the framework of these mavericks, more than maverick, killer Enver Pasha and the people alike. But it never went further than that. I mean, of course, its adventures, had caused many deaths among the Ottoman army at the time, but also among the populations of the Caucasus. Nuri Pasha is the one who had harsh, activities, I would say military activities in Baku against the Baku Armenians, as you know. So these military enterprises didn't really last, and this Panturanism receded very quickly, and with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, actually, and also with the post 1918, post 1923, the creation of the Republic, very much inward looking posture of the early republic. I mean, Ottomans were tired of killing and being killed. It's so between 1923 and 1945, I would say, it became a very introvert country. But this Panturanism, I mean, it's I don't know how much it means something today. It has taken other shapes. I will come to it, but it is not part of the overall ideology of the present regime in Turkey at all. And some, hardliners among the ultra-nationalists love to mention it, but it never goes beyond the rhetoric, really. It's we are from there. Oh, really? So, I mean, it doesn't go further than that. But I'll give you more concrete examples. So after 1989, this is the period which is of concern to us. Turkey developed its mainly this late Prime Minister Turgut Özal, whom you may remember, developed a renewed interest in the so-called ethnic and cultural kin or in the Caucasus and Central Asia, but still very idealized. There are many, accounts in these early diplomatic engagements with the countries of the region. It rapidly became a dismay for the authorities, neither culturally nor religiously, and even worse, linguistically. There were huge divergences between what is Turkey, or what was Turkey at the time, and those republics. And there are anecdotal evidence among the diplomats, who were visiting and trying to address their kins in Turkish, without any proper answer, of course, because they wouldn't understand. And very quickly they shifted to Russian Turkish interpreters to understand each other. So Over time, of course, these bilateral and multilateral relations have deepened. Yet, Turkey's ambitions in the region have been constantly outpaced by its material capabilities and the policy outcomes. In particular, the prospect of effectively challenging the entrenched influence of two countries, Russia and China. And I mean, Turkey is no match whatsoever for the influence of these two mastodont, which are Russia and China. So let's have a closer look to Turkey's evolving relations with the kinship in the Caucasus. And let's try to identify the real, concrete structural and geopolitical constraints shaping this engagement, and at the end to provide an assessment of future trajectories. I mean, where we can go from there in the light of regions ever shifting, as you know, geopolitical and geoeconomic dynamics. So I have 4 sub chapters, very briefly, because at the end of the day, I say briefly because the relationship of Turkey with its kinship in the Caucasus and particularly in Central Asia, this is not a matter on which you can talk over hours. It is very limited. At the end of the day, it's very, very limited. I mean, it's no comparison with the relationship the country has with Europe and the United States and its immediate neighborhood now since 2011 or so, in northern Mesopotamia. I mean, Syria and Iraq in particular. So, economic, political, cultural, and military domains. So, where are we in this interaction? The cultural affinities, of course, are by far the most visible ones, the most successful endeavors in a way, despite deep cultural odds, of course, due to the protracted Russian tropism. Today, Turkey's cultural influence, encompasses education mainly, and mass media, language, religion, and daily life, but with its limitations. But here a caveat there. Turkey literally discovered this kinship. When I say literally, I mean in the country there was no academic or diplomatic memory about these regions at all. I mean, they started from the scratch. I mean, Turks were virgin in terms of knowledge of their immediate kinship, including Azerbaijan, which is the most closest one. But for the other countries, it was a sheer discovery. First of all, it was a closed area, Soviet Union, and two, I mean, they didn't develop a kind of knowledge base, about those countries beyond the mythological rhetoric of the roots of the Turks in those lands. So, by the way, I mean, open a parenthesis here. There is a new trend now in Turkey among the young Turks who send their saliva to the US, for this DNA test, and the percentage of the Central Asian root either is nil or around 1 to 2%. So the heaviest, of course, shares goes to Greek, Armenian, and the other, the genetical roots. And, I mean, I can tell you the shock, particularly among the most nationalist ones, parenthesis closed. So the the promotion of Turkish as lingua franca. I mean, this is a real endeavor for all these countries, in order to to convince them to shift from the Cyrillic to the Latin alphabet. And it's already the case in Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan is in transition, and Kyrgyz are still using this Cyrillic alphabet. But of course, they keep their, it's not Turkish of Turkey at all. I mean, it has its own, peculiarities. But anyhow, they are slowly shifting to Latin alphabet, which will help, of course, in the communications. There are two universities, by the way. The one in Ahmet Yesevi in Kazakhstan, which is financed on equal footing by the two countries. And this Kyrgyz Manas University in Kyrgyzstan, which rests mainly on Turkish side. This university is Ahmet Yesevi University in Kazakhstan, is quite active on the issues that we were mentioning yesterday regarding this middle corridor. And they have produced a report, a specialized report on it. It was mentioned yesterday that this middle corridor was a Turkish invention, which is most probably the case. And this Yesevi University has produced extensive reports on the so-called Turkish World Vision 2040. Why 2040? I don't know. But and the seventh report is about this middle corridor. If you are interested to go, it's in the internet. So countless scholarships distributed to students in Turkish universities, which are not far from being the best in the region. The famous Turkish TV drama series, the overall promotion of Turkish lifestyle, etc., through Turkish brands, food, and the Turkic world narrative based on supposed common history. And I can tell you that I'm not a historian, but I mean, this common history is very, very limited, in real terms. Joint festivals, etc. Now they are rebranding in the school textbooks, the Central Asia, the Turkish school, the textbooks, as Turkestan. And it's new. It will be in the next school year, I think, Turkestan, fine, and the capacity building for civil servants. The problem is with the religious kinship. This is a kind of proselytism, under this Diyanet, the Director for Religious Affairs. And this is very delicate in these post-communist societies, who, by the way, have their own, I would say, liberal Sufi, traditions when it comes to Islam. It's far from being obvious, to listen to the envoys of this Turkish Diyanet, who preaches a kind of, radical Sunni, interpretation of Islam, which is quite far actually to those societies, and it simply doesn't work. And they try their best. I mean, they are much more active in the Middle East, the neighborhood, even in the Balkans, than in Central Asia. So a word on the military cooperation. Again, as I said, I mean, Turkey is no match to Russia. And its most significant involvement was in Azerbaijan, as you all know, and highly limited for other countries. But I mean, Russia's position, entanglement through its invasion of Ukraine, as well as the Nagorno-Karabakh involvement, that marked a decline in Russian influence, as well as an interest from at least two states, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, who pushed them to sign strategic partnership agreements with Turkey. We don't know where it will go; it's far away. But the Central Asian states have noted Ankara's growing influence, in terms of probably in drones, that probably helps explain the acceleration of their rapprochement at the expense of Russia in terms of military cooperation. But this Turkish drone, success, let's call it that way, something, again, a bracket there. It became famous, this Bayraktar, in the beginning of the war with Russia, with Ukraine. Ukraine now has its own, panoply of arms. Doesn't need these Bayraktars anymore. But this Bayraktar, you should know that the 10%, critical 10% of these war machines are imported. To today, Canada, Switzerland, Sweden, US, and Israel, and cease or stop to send these critical, parts to the Turkish, manufacturers. The drone production stops. Because this 10% is absolutely critical. Without that, the drones won't fly. Okay, they were dependent at 50-60%. Now they made quite advance in cutting the dependence, but this 10% of dependence is still very critical, and it's very much there. So. Of course, they are selling because it's cheap, but now the entire world almost is producing these drones. I don't know who will buy them at the end of the day. In Kazakhstan, they are even, producing jointly. And, okay, maybe it's a new partner, Turkey, in terms of military cooperation. But again, I mean, just on drones and maybe on military training, but it stops there. I mean, really, it's again, I mean, with the influence and the weight of Russia is unavoidable. So in terms of economy and trade, I will give you just a figure which will help you to realize its non-impact, I would say. Last year, 2025, this so-called Organization of Turkic States, OTS, that has reached a trade volume between themselves of 11.9 billion. Okay, let's say 12 billion. 12 for these 6 countries, and which is 1% of the total trade of the OTS countries taken together, which corresponds to $1.2 trillion. Of course, I mean, it's simply ridiculous. I mean, and of course the big share there goes to China and EU and Russia, and these are the main trading partners of these so-called OTS countries. Now the political impact. Okay, bilateral interactions. The OTS is the most substantial initiative, really. of integration among these Turkic-speaking states. I don't know why Hungary is there, but is no more, by the way. Because the very basis of it was this Turkic-speaking states. So okay, Orban is no more, and I don't think everybody's missing him, but. So it evolved from this Turkic Council, which existed, back in the 90s. But, the politically speaking, Turkey never managed to even to make them, accept the very reality of this so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, to, pushing every time there's a summit with this Turkic states to accept or recognize this entity which exists since 1983. Turkey never managed to convince anyone, including its best pal, Azerbaijan, to recognize this country. To the contrary, these states recognize, and two of them, I think, recently, last year, openly, recognized the Republic of Cyprus, the EU member, Republic of Cyprus. So, but I mean, still, keep pushing, and they managed to make the newly elected president of this non-recognized Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus to the last summit in Astana on 16th, 17th of May, and but that's all, no more than that. I mean, he was duly received, and wined and dined, and no more than that. So a word on this Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, are full members. But Turkey, few years ago, 10 years ago, started to flirt with this Shanghai Cooperation Council organization, but they managed to get the lowest level of affiliation because no one wanted them no one wanted a NATO member. To become, frankly, or have a serious position within the organization, and they got this dialogue partner. This is the lowest level of relationship since 2012. They attend all these meetings. I think Erdogan and its regime uses this flirt with the organization, with Shanghai, just to tell the old Western partners of the country, look, I'm also in good terms, and I'm also dealing with other people than you. But what is the end result? Concretely speaking, where it leads, because they keep making attempts, to become another type of member, but to start with, Russia says no way. It's you are a NATO member, and do understand this. Please stop, pushing us. So. At the individual country level, of course, Azerbaijan tops the list with this agreement on strategic partnership and mutual support, which is the backbone of the bilateral, bond with Baku, and of course, with these two energy corridors, the BTC, and TANAP. Otherwise, with the exception of Turkmenistan, which is rather apart, as you know, the relationship of Ankara with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan are increasingly meaningful, but never again to match China and Russia, be it on security, finance, or trade chapters. So Turkey will remain an eternal number 3 for this region, and will has. I don't see any any opportunity for Turkey to become a weighty and a serious partners for this country. So finally, a word on Azerbaijan. As I said, this is the most developed bond, relationship, interaction, whatever, and military edge that is on Turkish side. And we all know this is a hidden secret, the involvement of the Turkish army in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and on the financial edge is of course Azerbaijan. Turkey needs cash, is almost a bankrupt country which continues to exist thanks to unaccounted financial means, to put it lightly. So Azerbaijan over years has become an important partner. At least 25 billion US dollar investment which are transparent, and the non-transparent investments, of course, we have no idea, but they are very much in, they are present in Turkey, and they have an influence over the decision of the regime, at least as far as the relationship with Armenia is concerned. It's no coincidence that this agreement, this strategic partnership agreement between Baku and Ankara was signed in 2010. This is right after the collapse of the Zurich protocols, remember? For the normalization between Armenia and Turkey, that was, and they collapsed in 2009. And 1 year later, this strategic agreement between Baku and Ankara was signed. So a word on this middle corridor, the invention of Turkey, this Zangezur talk. We had an expose yesterday. This policy still needs much flesh on the bones, really, and for obvious reasons I mentioned. It's rather, it looks wishful thinking, and I don't know whether it has any weight in terms of political ambitions. Okay, they mention it, but it doesn't go far than that, because they cannot, as I say, they cannot put flesh on the bones of this idea or this dream of challenging the northern and the southern corridor. I'll stop there, Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Movahedian was a professor of international relations at the Islamic Azad University of Tehran. My understanding is that he is currently the director of international relations in the Planning and Budget Organization under the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. He is a recognized expert on the Caucasus, and he holds a PhD in international relations and affairs from the Alameh Tabatabai University. He has published extensively, mainly in Persian, on cyber diplomacy, international relations, American studies, and especially Iranian security in the context of that region, including the South Caucasus.
Hello everybody, thank you for having me with you. My topic is the Islamic Republic of Iran's consideration in the South Caucasus after the two recent wars with the United States and Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, geopolitical developments in the South Caucasus in recent years, especially after the wars of 2020 and 2023 and the subsequent wider conflicts in the Middle East, have turned this region into one of the most sensitive points on Iran's periphery. Iran not only shares a land border with the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan, but also maintains deep historical, cultural, and civilizational ties with this region. Unlike extra-regional powers such as the United States and Israel, which view the Caucasus solely as an instrument for advancing their hegemony and weakening rivals like Iran, Russia, and China, the Islamic Republic of Iran regards this region as having intrinsic civilizational value. For Iran, stability, territorial integrity, and genuine development in the Caucasus countries are not a threat. They are part of its own national security and national interests. Iran has no intention of destabilizing Armenia or other Caucasus states or using their territory to create insecurity for its neighbors, a stance that stands in stark contrast to the instrumental approach of the United States, Britain, and Israel. The two recent wars, the 12-day war and 40-day war with Israel and the United States, mark a turning point in Tehran's strategic calculations. After 4 decades of strategic patience, these conflicts demonstrated that Iran can no longer remain indifferent to the US and allied military and security maneuver in neighboring states. In these wars, Iran proved in practice that it will not stay silent in the face of military intelligence and cyber bases operated by the United States and Israel in the region. This sensitivity has naturally extended to the Caucasus, especially given that the Republic of Azerbaijan has become a platform for Israel logistical and energy supply operations. As a result of these developments, the Islamic Republic of Iran defense doctrine has shifted from a purely defensive posture to a preventive defense approach. Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi, the then Chief of General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, announced that Iran has revised its military doctrine and was moving towards a more active deterrence. This change means that Tehran will not remain silent in the face of any project that aims to encircle it geopolitically, threaten its national security, or reduce its economic and transit capabilities. The destruction of US-linked military and logistical infrastructure in the southern Persian Gulf clearly showed that Iran has both the will and the capacity to confront facilities that operate against its national security. The so-called Zangezur corridor and the Trump road are by no means an exception to this rule. If these roads go beyond their mere transit and commercial function and become a destructive buffer for the security and military presence of foreign forces, Iran will not tolerate them. The main focus of Iran's concern is the so-called Zangezur corridor, now repackaged as the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. This corridor is supposed to cut through Armenia's Sunni province to connect mainland Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan and then to Turkey. From Tehran's perspective, this is not simply an economic project, it is a multi-layered program with geopolitical, security, and identity-related objectives. First, a core goal is to cut Iran out of the region's transit and corridor networks and to reduce its transit revenues, a goal openly acknowledged by Western and American think tanks. Second, the corridor could pave the way for a NATO and US military presence on Iran's northern doorstep, which constitutes a direct threat to Iran's national security. Third, the road is a tool for advancing pan-Turkism and linking the so-called Turkic world under the leadership of Turkey and Azerbaijan. For Iran, with its significant Azeri-speaking population, this poses a direct identity and security threat. Fourth, the so-called Zangezur Corridor is a link in completing the Abraham Accord in the Caucasus and Central Asia, turning the Republic of Azerbaijan into a logistical base and an energy supply source for Israel. Iran has made it clear that it will not accept the transformation of the Caucasus into a base for Israel, and if necessary, it will employ its operational capacities to counter it. One of the most sensitive dimensions of the Trump Road is the plan to lease or grant long-term operational rights over the parts of Sunni province to American companies for a period of 49 and 99 years. This would undermine Armenians' national sovereignty and exactly replicate the pattern we previously witnessed in Artsakh: infiltration, beginning with economic presence and investment, then extending into cultural, religious, and security spheres, and ultimately laying the groundwork for separation and annexation. The long-term presence of U.S. institutions linked to Zionist Christian missionary networks could also promote deviant Christian sects and weaken the Armenian Apostolic Church. Moreover, during a meeting with U.S. Vice President Vance, Armenia's Prime Minister presented a map showing a corridor at least 5 kilometers wide running exactly along the Iranian-Armenian border. That plan would effectively sever the physical border between the two countries, create an air corridor above the frontier, and obstruct any land and aerial connection between Iran and Armenia. In the face of these threats, Iran has consistently stressed its red lines. Any change in internationally recognized borders in the region and any foreign military presence adjacent to Iran's northern borders are absolutely unacceptable. Ali Akbar Velayati, senior advisor of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, has explicitly stated that Iran will block the so-called Zangezur corridor even without Russia's help. Iran's foreign minister has also stressed that Armenia has guaranteed that all of Iran's red lines will be respected and that no U.S. forces will be stationed on Iran-Armenia border. The Armenian government is undoubtedly sincere in this regard, but the track record of U.S. presence and behavior in Iran's neighboring countries shows that our American promises cannot be trusted at all. In contrast to the Western-sponsored corridor designed to isolate Iran, the International North-South Transport Corridor (INSTC) offers a natural, secure model aligned with the interests of all regional actors. The INSTC begins in Russia and the Caucasus, passes through Iran, and reaches the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, from where it connects to India and the Indian Ocean. For Armenia, this road provides secure and reliable access to the open waters of South and expanded international trade. Trilateral consultations between Iran, India, and Armenia in 2025 focused especially on cooperation within the INSTC framework and on Armenia's Crossroads of Peace project. The Crossroads of Peace project, presented by the Armenian government in October 2023, is built on the principles of national sovereignty and territorial integrity and is designed without any foreign security or military presence. Iran is fully prepared to participate in widening and upgrading the transport links on its borders with Armenia, and to facilitate this process through dialogue with European countries seeking alternative transit routes, strengthening the Persian Gulf Black Sea corridor via Armenia and Georgia is one of the major capacities now on Tehran-Yerevan agenda, with the crossroads of peace playing a vital role. It is worth noting that even at the height of the recent wars, Iranian companies and corporations never ceased their work on Armenian soil to improve and expand the north-south corridor routes, a clear evidence of the strategic priority Tehran attaches to this path. Another dimension of Iran's concern in the Caucasus relates to threats to the territorial integrity and falsification of the region's ethnic cultural identity. The continued use by the Republic of Azerbaijan of the term of Western Azerbaijan to refer to the territory of modern-day Armenia shows that Baku's territorial ambitions have not ended. The experience of 2020 and 2023 wars demonstrated that Western security guarantees for Armenia's territorial integrity are ineffective and self-serving. In the recent US and Israel war against Iran, countries hosting US bases emerged as the principal losers of the aggression against Iran, and the American security umbrella failed to protect them. Therefore, if Armenia accepts Western corridors based on the personal promises of Donald Trump, contractual and inherently unstable, it will face two major risks. First, if Trump is weakening, impeached, or removed from office, these commitments will lose all validity, and Baku will be tempted to attack Armenia and occupy Syunik. Second, the United States has shown in recent years that it has very little respect for the international borders of other countries or for the principles of international law that it itself helped to establish after the Second World War. Consequently, Armenia cannot count on the United States to safeguard its territorial integrity. Iran and Armenia are two ancient civilizations with deep historical and cultural ties. The similarities between the worldview and canons of the Armenian Apostolic Church and the principles of Shia Islam, the political jurisprudence in Iran, together with shared Eastern traditions, form the pillars of this bond. Weakening the Church as the guardian of Armenia's identity and independence, whether through the promotion of Zionist Christian sects or through pan-Turkism, serves the interests of the West and Israel at the expense of both countries' national interests. Iran therefore emphasizes three priorities concerning Armenia. First, preserving national unity, particularly by countering the idea and divine sects that by countering the ideas and divine sects that undermine the Armenian Apostolic Church, safeguarding territorial integrity and maintaining political stability. Furthermore, despite its tensions with certain European countries in other areas, the Islamic Republic of Iran shares significant common interests with Europe in the Caucasus. These include opposing border changes and pan-Turkism, developing genuinely economic corridors, supporting the right of return of Armenians to Artsakh, combating hate speech and historical distortions, protecting the Caspian Sea environment, and upholding the rights of minorities such as the Talishs, Tats, and Kurds in the Republic of Azerbaijan. Iran is not seeking to push European actors out of Caucasus. Rather, it aims to play a balancing role that serves the interests of the region's peoples. Under these circumstances, a proposed strategy for protecting Armenia is a positive neutrality. This concept applied in Iran's contemporary history by late Prime Minister Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh under the name of negative equilibrium means preserving political and economic independence, rejecting one-sided military alliances, and maintaining balanced relations with all powers and neighbors. Armenia today finds itself in a situation much like Iran in 1950s, encircled by great powers and at the risk of losing its sovereignty. For Yerevan, positive neutrality means that instead of one-sided security dependence on NATO or Russian-led collective security treaty organization, Armenia should strengthen its domestic defense capabilities and pursue balanced security cooperation with both Moscow and Tehran. Instead of relying on exclusively Western transit corridors, it should move toward upgrading the North-South corridor and the crossroads of peace, and instead of allowing the Armenian Church and Armenian diaspora to be weakened, it should reinforce its historical and civilizational assets. As Armenia approaches its election, it is essential that the people of the country determine their future completely independently without any foreign interference, drawing on past bitter experiences and fully aware of geopolitical intrigues aimed at their independence and territorial integrity. Positive neutrality does not mean passivity. Iran and Armenia can design a joint strategic cooperation model in the fields of intelligence, training, and border exercises that sends a firm message to ill-wishers without in any way compromising Armenia's sovereignty. In conclusion, by transforming its defensive doctrine into one of preventing defense and learning the lessons of the recent wars, the Islamic Republic of Iran is determined to stand against any scheme aimed at encirclement or creating insecurity in the Caucasus, including the so-called Zangezur corridor and Trump route. Tehran will tolerate these routes only if they remain purely transit and economic in nature and don't lead to the security military presence of foreigners and Iran's enemies. In contrast, the North-South corridor and the crossroads of peace are a stable, secure, and inclusive model for regional development that can earn the trust of all actors, Russia, China, India, and Europe, and bring stability and prosperity to the Caucasus. By adopting a strategy of positive neutrality and preserving balance in its foreign relations, Armenia will be able to safeguard its independence, territorial integrity, and national security at this critical historical juncture. Lasting peace in the Caucasus can only be achieved through respect for territorial integrity, good neighborly relations, and genuine economic cooperation. And Iran is determined to defend these principles and to assist Armenia against any encirclement scheme. Thank you for your patience and attention, and goodbye.
We have now Dr. Joseph Keshishian, whom I believe I introduced, and is a good friend. We are going to take a look at a perspective more from the Gulf region. As some of you, the speakers, the specialists know, There are various projects also going from that area. Israel is involved for some of them. There are things through Syria and various other issues. So let's take a look at that dimension of the problem now, and then we'll have a Q&A. It's too bad we cannot ask questions to our Iranian colleague, but you listen to his talk. So Joseph, please.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I'm glad to be back in Hayastan for my fourth visit, although this is the first time that I come to AUA. I want to thank first Stepan for the kind invitation. He mentioned that the last time we met was almost 20 years ago, and in fact I remember vividly that he invited me to speak to one of his classes at the University of California in Berkeley. And hopefully the next time it will not take 20 years because I'll probably be dead by then, Stepan. So I'm an old man now. So hopefully we will see each other again. Now my task today is to ask really a question, whether the Trans-Caspian international transport route is vital to the Middle East and the Arab world in general. I'll try my best to answer this question, of course, and I will give you an insight as to what my understanding is about the different actors in the Gulf region. So let me go ahead and start. Even before the latest American-Israeli war for Iran, and you notice what I use the word for Iran, not in Iran, but more so now, the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, TITR, has become increasingly important for the entire Middle East, primarily because it could well be a strategic alternative to unstable maritime routes. Still, while the TITR primarily proposes to link China to Europe, it offers crucial risk diversification for regional trade and enhances connectivity for several countries, including Iraq and the conservative Arab Gulf monarchies, provided core security conditions are met. Whether Middle Eastern states will manage to provide envisaged protection provisions remains to be determined. Although the TITR may well become a key trade link between Western China and Europe, bypassing both Russia's northern corridor and the Suez Canal, and while this network of rail, road, and maritime transport offers a shorter trade route, its importance has grown in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, making it an appealing option for international commerce. Let's bear in mind that transportation costs for a 40-foot container ranges from $3,500 to $4,500 in the proposed middle corridor. Compare this to $2,800 to $3,200 in the northern corridor through Russia. Meanwhile, maritime routes further south are far more cost-effective, with prices between $1,500 and $2,000 per container. This substantial cost difference often outweighs the longer transit time, particularly as ships can transport ever-growing volumes of cargo compared to trains and road access. We have also heard how the corridor has expanded rapidly, though it still faces infrastructure, operational, and geopolitical challenges that require ongoing investment and collaboration. And my purpose here is to look a bit further south to explore the structure strategic importance, challenges, and future potential of the middle corridor within the evolving landscape of Eurasian trade. In fact, while the TI-TR may well become an alternative to maritime choke points, and inasmuch as it provides an essential safeguard against disruptions in traditional shipping lanes, particularly the Straits of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and the Suez Canal, how Iran, Iraq, and the Gulf Cooperation Council states align their interests with the TI-TR, especially to avoid geopolitical instability, are truly vital concerns. Critical developments may well sabotage whatever gains designers fathom, and it behooves us to identify what the TI-TR faces in terms of crucial challenges. Let me offer a few critical ones, and I will emphasize three main ones. First, geopolitical strategic leverage. What do I mean by that? How Iran, Iraq, and the conservative Arab Gulf monarchies coordinate or coordinated in the past their relationships with Turkey and Azerbaijan, ostensibly to position themselves as indispensable transit hubs in East-West trade, could well shift every participant's dependency away from Russian-controlled northern routes. I accept that. Still, shifting from northern routes to safer southern ones will have to contend with serious regional challenges, especially in the Caucasus. 2. The strategic connectivity for Turkey. Presumably, Turkey could well be a key beneficiary using the route to connect Central Asia and China directly to Europe. It will also benefit from a solidified Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway and the Marmaray Tunnel, although it's unclear whether Ankara will coordinate its activities with Iran, with Iraq, and the GCC monarchies to benefit non-Turkish actors. This is an important point. Why should Turkey really help others? As a bridge between Asia and Europe, Turkey's role in the corridor truly enhances its geopolitical standing and strengthens its influence in regional trade and economic diplomacy, though bypassing traditional trade routes to the north will create itself fresh challenges. I was struck when I was writing my presentation last week. By chance, I happened to read a Financial Times article by John Paul Rathbone, a serious journalist, who addressed several of the concerns, and it might be useful to just go over the most pertinent ones for you. A few months ago, Turkey began installing the systems needed to process passports at the border with Armenia, a move that could unlock a crucial trade route linking Asia to Europe. The project, backed by the United States President as part of his peace plans for Armenia and Azerbaijan, even under his grandiose name, the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, TRIPP. Mr. Trump likes grandiose steps. I will not comment on that, but you can read my mind. The geopolitical stakes indeed are large. The eventual reopening of the Armenian border forms part of Ankara's efforts to position Turkey as a secure trade hub for goods and energy flows, rerouted away from geopolitical choke points, this is the Turkish argument, above all the war-threatened Straits of Hormuz. Now, I would like to give credit to Ankara on this point because it has avoided direct involvement in both the Ukraine war and the latest Gulf conflicts, and Turkish officials perhaps aim to benefit from the $3 trillion a year Europe-Asia trade, 90% of which today goes by sea. The middle corridor, therefore, will apparently take about 2 weeks from China to Europe, And how Turkey wishes to proceed is really telling. There are two projects under considerations, as I'm sure you know. The first is the Development Road, a road and rail network that links the Gulf to Europe via Turkey, bypassing maritime choke points such as Hormuz and Suez. But it's still in the planning stage. It requires billions of dollars in investment and passes through unstable Iraq. This last point is often neglected. Iraq is not your paragon of stability. To be sure, it might be easier to go through Saudi Arabia, to Jordan and Syria, but this is a very long-term initiative. The second project, an expansion of the Middle Corridor, holds more promise as the TRIPP, a US-sponsored road and rail link between Turkey and Azerbaijan that passes through Armenia, adding needed capacity to an existing route through Georgia. Time will tell whether this will materialize, although some work has already started on the Azeri side. Now, as the Financial Times article revealed, and I'm quoting here from the article, the route depends on slow ferry crossing across the Caspian Sea, uneven rail infrastructure with different gauges, and complex customs procedures across multiple borders. That makes it far slower than the Northern Corridor, which joins China to Europe via a direct rail link through Russia and already carries 40 million tons of freight a year, end quote. Now, these challenges cannot be overlooked, and it's important to step away from the hype that has engulfed our discussion so far of what is envisaged with what is possible. The writer of the Financial Times article, Rathbone, quoted a recent report from JP Morgan, the investment bank, that described the Middle Corridor as a, quote, route that everyone needs, but few choose to use, end quote. The TRIPP also skirts Iran, and we've just heard a few moments ago, making it vulnerable to attack. Russia, which has traditionally dominated the Caucasus, is also alarmed. President Putin warned Armenia it might curb Russian gas supplies to the country if it continued to reorientate its trade flows towards Europe. Thus, it may be safe to say that TRIPP became possible because Russia was distracted by the war in Ukraine. With the war in the Gulf, several pipelines that transported Iranian and Iraqi crude through Turkey reopened, and there is even talk of reawakening the dormant Trans-Caspian pipeline project to carry up to 1 trillion cubic feet of gas to Europe from Central Asia through Turkey. For now, the TRIPP is only a political vision, and time will tell what will happen to it. I am not optimistic. The third point to come back to are the regional economic growth concerns. To be sure, the route, that is TITR, the route could accelerate regional integration and investment, encourage the development of digital corridors, and upgrade port infrastructure in the Caspian region, though how these Ankara-Baku gains could strengthen both countries is difficult to fathom when instability in the Caucasus, including with Armenia and Georgia, threatens long-term prosperity. It is critical to note that these ideas, including cross-Turkey land routes providing alternatives to maritime choke points in the Gulf, or even to the established Northern Corridor through Russia, are projects, nothing more. Given these crucial challenges, what are the existing limitations, and how can Iran, Iraq, and the conservative Arab Gulf monarchies benefit from the TR? First, it's crucial to note that despite its growing importance, the Middle Corridor is not yet a dominant route for the region and may not gain any traction. There are several reasons for this cautionary point, including the current low capacity, which is handling a fraction, approximately 5% only, of the cargo transported by the Northern Corridor. That's significant, only 5%. Two, logistical bottlenecks that are limiting its growth, because the Caspian Sea segment requires complex multimodal transfers, rail, sea, rail, which is complicated because Azerbaijan is poorly equipped to handle increased traffic. There is a substantial shortage of ships in the Caspian Sea for the time being, and while larger investments in such infrastructure could alleviate shortages, this may well take some time to achieve. There are also costs that are quite high, as it is generally far more expensive to develop needed infrastructure in an area prone for corruption. Moreover, land traffic tends to be far slower than sea routes. And although Iran, Iraq, and the GCC states would certainly prefer to develop alternatives to their own choke points, it's unclear whether they will do so in the near future. And another reason, perhaps the most important point, is the overall levels of regional instability, as I've stated above, because tensions in the South Caucasus between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and between Azerbaijan and Iran, for example, along with upheavals in the broader Middle East, could threaten the core steadiness of the route. Now, this is quite pessimistic, I know that. I apologize for my pessimism, but I want to add a few words about what the Arab Gulf countries in particular are thinking about cooperating on corridors before I conclude. And I want to give you specific examples of not all 6 countries, but maybe 3 of them, only 3 of them. For the moment, as I said, the regional actors are responding to acute pressures on supply chains. They're dealing with crisis management related corridors. The Saudi Ports Authority, as it is known in Arabic, Mawani, is in fact announced a tie-up with the Sharjah logistics company Gulf Tainer to boost connectivity between the MAM, which is inside the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf for those who don't like Persian Gulf, between the MAM in the kingdom's eastern province and Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. So the UAE Saudi Arabia trade route will utilize the Korfakhan Island corridor, Korfakhan Commercial Terminal, and Sajah Dry Port to create integrated inland and land corridors as part of efforts to bypass the Straits of Hormuz. I'll give you another example. The customs departments in Oman and Dubai also have set up new green corridor to better connect Omani and Emirati ports and free zones and facilitate the overland shipment of diverted goods. Additional customs facilitation measures were subsequently put in place, but the facilitation is temporary in nature and will remain in force during the current exceptional situation until further notice. Politics and governance of regional affairs, according to several Gulf officials, is what is preventing further development. I'll give you one last example, Qatar, which is tapping into regional reconfigurations of crucial economic activities as well, both out of need and perhaps out of foresight. In early March this year, for example, the Qatar Chamber announced that it could facilitate the movement of goods to the Saudi land border with fast-track customs procedures in an agreement that looks prescient and in hindsight. Saudi Arabia's Mawani and Qatar's port management company signed a memorandum of understanding on February 18 to boost maritime and logistic cooperation. In other words, you see that there is an effort to accelerate the process. Let me conclude. Under the circumstances, it would be fair to conclude that the TITR may not be as strategically vital to the Middle East as some may assume, even if theoretically it may well be a necessary alternative because of ongoing American-Israeli wars against Iran, and let's not forget Lebanon as well, where on a daily basis the Israelis are killing between 15 to 20 people in the south. For their parts, Turkey and Azerbaijan also assume that the GCC states, in particular, will back the TI-TR as a complementary, not primary, trade route for the region, with its long-term importance dependent on addressing significant infrastructure and coordination bottlenecks, though this may well require that Iraq, Syria, and perhaps other countries join the scheme to build vital oil and gas pipelines. So far, they haven't done any of it. This is therefore a very, very long-term proposition, one that Iran and leading Arab Gulf states will factor in their calculations. Naturally, the decision to join the TI-TR will necessitate an end to the ongoing wars, a restoration of confidence among various actors, and far more important, significant coordination among countries determined to avoid the Northern Corridor. Whether China will manage to persuade most is difficult to know at this stage, at least, even if its intrinsic diplomatic and economic skills cannot, indeed should not, be excluded. For now, several Gulf countries are purchasing Ukrainian interceptors to down Iranian drones led by Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Security talks are underway with Bahrain, with Kuwait, with Oman, and Kiev as well to acquire more interceptors, which is a priority over building new pipelines to hook up with TI-TR. Let's be realistic. Moreover, the ongoing wars are moving the entire region towards a truly competitive environment, though security, not economics, remains the first priority. Nevertheless, all wars eventually end, and while some suspiciousness will linger, conservative Arab Gulf monarchies will most likely shed their pre-war détente towards Iran in favor of deterrence and pressure. How that will affect their joining the TI-TR is not clear. As stated above, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are turning to South Korean missile systems, Ukrainian interceptors, and British startups to replenish air defenses drained by Iranian bombardments on their critical infrastructure, which will further drain sorely needed financial resources to invest in TI-TR efforts when that decision is made. We have to be patient. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to have the question and answer session. Unfortunately, as you know, our Iranian colleagues are not here. Just a few comments. First, Dr. Akhtar mentioned the renaming in forthcoming textbooks in Turkey of the area of Central Asia into Turkestan. There is another renaming, the Ege Denizi, the Aegean Sea is going to become the Adalar Denizi, the island sea. Okay, so we have a reshaping of geographic perceptions and names. That's one little thing. The second thing is, so far, from the various talks, it appears that when it comes to TRIPP, which is much discussed in Armenia, in particular for internal electoral purposes, it seems to me that at this point there is no solid evidence, documented evidence about its purported massive economic benefits for Armenia. There is no hard evidence. So that's the second point. That doesn't mean that over time it might not turn into something very significant. I am not excluding that, especially if it becomes part of the so-called crossroads of peace, with re-entry through Yeras into Armenia, up to Gyumri, Kars, ideally from Kars to Azerbaijan. But there are technical problems. I am saying all that not for my colleagues, but for the general audience. The railway lines, as you know, have been conceded to Russia. And enthusiastic statement to the effect that we'll just take them back and this and that from Russia, might be a little bit optimistic. And I think there will be a very nasty turning point in the relations between Armenia and Russia, which was a point made yesterday by one of the speakers. I don't remember who it was, but that's to me absolutely obvious. The third thing which appeared through Dr. Keshishian's talk is that all these big projects with glorious names, visions, and so on, overall they are projects at this point, okay? They look great, exciting, competing with one another, major players involved, but there needs, as President Mitterrand, the former president of France, whom I didn't like at all actually, used to say, one has to give time to time. Il faut donner du temps au temps. The second term being capitalized, the second time, you know. We'll see whether all of this is going to come to be realized, to come true. The final point, the important point, is that all of these things have a security dimension that Dr. Keshishian mentioned. In the Caucasus, whether real peace will be signed and really implemented, whether the statement about mutual benefits for Armenia will turn out to be effectively in place, that is, that Armenia will have real mutual benefits. That also time will tell. But at any rate, the various conflicts, Iraq was mentioned today in terms of instability and complications. Needless to say, the Iranian issue, the Armenian-Azerbaijani thing that hasn't been fully concluded with evidence supporting the idea that a love story is starting between the two countries, when there are demands for the return of 300,000 Azerbaijanis to Western Azerbaijan. Hate speech has been systematized, and so on. All of these do not inspire. Which doesn't mean that over time, slowly, these things might disappear, but there isn't the slightest evidence at this point that they are on their way to disappearance, I would say. Yeah. Final point, and then I'll shut up and you'll ask your questions, and I will ask my colleagues also to participate in the Q&A, all of you, because the Iranian scholar is not here. The building of the Kars railway, circumventing literally Armenia, and costing, I have seen various estimates, from $2.4 billion or euros to $3 billion. So this is not a peanut project. This is a very, very expensive. If you really want to integrate Armenia in the, the so-called crossroads of peace and so on, it becomes a little bit difficult to see why that would need to be built, because it's with loans. It's not that Turkey has that money to finance it. I have mentioned all of these again. It's for the audience, not for my colleagues, to tell you that these issues are very complicated, and any simplistic statement in Armenia on either side of the political spectrum has to be taken with a grain of salt. All these having been said, feel free to ask whatever questions you have. Yes, Professor Horak, if you could go to the microphone so that the audience can hear you.
So, good morning or good afternoon, I'm not sure what's better. I have actually a lot of comments and questions to Professor Kashishan, but I will answer him with my presentation in the afternoon, so I will skip that point. The question to, or maybe a remark to Dr. Akhtar, I have just, throughout your presentation, I had the impression of your, let's say, critical critical approach to Turkey, which is quite fine, I totally share with you, but sometimes it seems to me that you underestimate the contemporary role of Turkey inside Central Asia, and in two ways, not just in hardware, I mean military and so on, but as kind of software. It means the growing interests of people in Central Asia and Turkey, growing migration, at least in case of some states, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. You can see that Istanbul is today packed with Turkmen, Uzbek, partially Kyrgyz migrants. And the third, let's say, something which we might call entertainment soft power. It means the influence through all these like Turkish TV, soap operas and whatever that are extremely popular in Central Asia. They are usually screened or very often screened either with subtitles only or even without that. Yeah, so that also enhance the role of Turkey as kind of cultural magnet for cultural or humanitarian magnet for people in Central Asia. So maybe your comment on that would be appreciated.
Like last year, I had invited two speakers to deal with Turkey. I invited a speaker, he couldn't make it. I invited another one. He could make it, he was enthusiastic. We bought the ticket, as Ms. Handamirian knows, and the next day the ticket had to be cancelled because that person had presumably a meeting in Ankara about which he wasn't aware 10 hours earlier. Whatever the case might be, I invited also a third one. I am talking about super establishment scholars. Okay, super establishment. I'm really representing the Turkish state. The third one didn't reply, and I felt fully satisfied with my own efforts and put an end to them after congratulating myself. Yeah. So now,
thank you. I think
just to add to what Slavomir said, I also think, as we discussed a little bit in the corridor, I think you're a little bit underestimating the role that Turkey plays in the region and the soft power that it has. And here, to what has been said already, I would add education, yeah, and the importance of former Kazakh Turkish lyceums, so Kyrgyz Turkish lyceums. They've you know, they've been around for a while. They're very popular with parents, and then they do create these solidarity networks. So you do meet these graduates of these lyceums, and they keep in touch, and that's I think that's a big I think that's a big thing, because there are many of them, and they have this sense of affinity, and you see educated in Turkey government officials, and there is certain reorientation now, like very, very soft, because previously our government officials would be mostly educated in Russia, then the Western educated people appeared, but Turkish educated officials are there, and they they have a different worldview from. Also in China, yes. That's a kind of a new thing, but compared to Turkey, I would say it's still down there. I think trust is very important. Trust is such a scarce commodity these days, international relations, and Turkey is trusted. If you look at the polls, Turkey is the most trusted external actor, particularly Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and also Uzbekistan, actually. So I think that's and in Turkmenistan, I don't know if they do polls.
No, they don't do, but...
Okay, yeah, okay. That's what I think. And connectivity, like, we fly via Istanbul everywhere, pretty much, like all the time. So, and there is a visa-free regime for Central Asians, which is a very, very big thing. Just to add a little bit.
I will just add another thing that maybe all of you know more about. The concept of, what was it, Turan Ordusu, the Turan army. You know, the talk about creating a kind of, some people refer to it as a Turkic NATO, or it's exaggerated, of course. But what's going on with that theme, you know? Is it just a vague idea? Are there mini steps being taken? Is there resistance towards such an entity? I haven't dug into that issue personally yet. So if anybody knows anything, you know, we can address that. But first, let's have Dr. Akhtar.
So, Stefan Asturian informed you about the super establishment scholars who didn't manage to come. So I'm not one of them. I'm very sorry. I'm not representing the Republic of Turkey, and of course, with what you both telling me about the soft power of Turkey, it depends on where you look at this so-called soft power. I mean, if you look at it from your point of view, trying to balance or counterbalance the weight and the influence of Russia and China, of course. But I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, you mentioned to me in the corridor also this Süleyman Demirel University, where the curriculum is in English, not in Kazakh nor Turkish. I'm sorry, and this is why I didn't mention it. So, I mean, you may be, puzzled, interested, under impression of this Turkish way of life. This, after all, is a country with Islamic background, and which is very close to Europe. It has a quote-unquote European way of life, and it has its charm. Yes, I understand this charm. But let's not forget that this country, you just go and look at the educational statistics of the OECD, Turkey is the last country when it comes to, to the performance in education. Mm-hmm. There are 208 universities in Turkey. The vast majority of them are called the building universities. It's just 7-floor building, and it's called university. They make money, and they, I mean, they have no academic, weight or influence or performance indicators wise. They're nothing. I mean, they are not. And the best Turkish universities, you may have heard of this famous Boğaziçi in Bolis, Istanbul, etc., is dead. And it was killed by the government, literally. Huh? Yes. And it was one of the top universities in the world, among the first 400, etc. Now it's gone down the drain. Yeah. The Turkish scholars are leaving Turkey. Academicians, no, but I mean, this is soft power. I mean, you are talking about soft power, this is okay. And the Turkish academicians are leaving Turkey, and by hordes, by masses, and because there is no more freedom of expression and freedom of research in Turkey. So if this is what you are aiming at, good luck. I mean, this is good luck. Take it. I mean, it's underestimating. Okay, this is not. I'm not underestimating anything. You just go and go through the international, classifications on freedom of expression, the rule of law, crime rate, etc. I mean, Turkey is at the bottom of each and every international classification. I'm very sorry. It's not me. No, but I mean, it's you don't agree. You just go and look at the international classification. If this is what you are aiming at as the soft power to challenge or to counter, weight to Russia, of course, yes, understandable. I mean, Turkey is a bit better than Russia, or in terms of freedom of expression, etc. Yes, maybe. Okay, fine. But I mean, no more than that. So, I mean, where do you go from there? I mean, is Turkey a country today which can offer an alternative vision of society and individual, performance to this land, to this huge geography? In my opinion, no. In your opinion, maybe. So, okay, as I said, I mean, good luck. And you asked the question of this TV series, etc. I mentioned them already. I mean, it's okay, the Turkish way of life. But I mean, Turkey is a totalitarian country. Don't forget. Turkey is a totalitarian country, I repeat. I mean, there is no, they just shut down virtually the opposition party. I mean, this is, migrants. Of course, it's a huge market. It's like Armenia. There are also many migrants in Armenia. Of course, people make more money in Turkey than elsewhere. But once they are there, the aim is to continue, further west. And that is difficult. So this is, I mean, in a nutshell, what I want to say. I fully, understand the charm of Turkey. Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, where does it go from there? Frankly, I have my very serious doubts.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to our discussion with Professor Kasimov and remind that current president of Kazakhstan, Mr. Tokayev, studied in China. So, of course, in the future, in China as well. Of course, in the future, the soft power and scholarships which are going towards Central Asia from Turkey and from China will play a role. But we need to also remember that in these countries, Russian language is like the mother tongue, and this kind of relations, when we are checking how many thousands of students are studying in Russia, so Russia will keep its place as well. So there is no need to underestimate or overestimate nor Russia nor Turkey. And going back to Professor Asturian comment, which is a very important comment, and I saw this yesterday as well, there is some kind of misunderstanding about Central Asia and Armenia, saying Turkey, they understand that it is the same Turks that are living west from Armenia. But no, in Central Asia, we have sovereign states with their culture, with their histories. Like Uzbekistan, we remember what was happening between Uzbekistan and Turkey not so long ago, and between Kyrgyzstan and Turkey as well. So of course Turkey is having much more opportunities now, but let's say no one in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, or in Turkmenistan is waiting for uncle from Ankara who can come and they will give him energy resources and something and their sovereignty. It is not working like this. There are sovereign states and they will keep their place. And my question for Professor Keshishan, as you are coming from Saudi Arabia, I cannot go forward without this question. What kind of impact will have the US-Iran war on further vision of Saudi Arabia on building its security and economy? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. In fact, the Arab Gulf monarchies, including Saudi Arabia, are really the big losers of the latest Israeli-American war against Iran. Why are they the losers? Because they have a vision, they have a project to actually reformulate their socio-economic patterns. And now this has not only been delayed, but some of the primary investments that they had in socio-economic affairs have been put on the back burner because security matters have taken precedence. So therefore, they are clear losers in this respect. There are 2 or maybe 3 countries that are really suffering out of this war, because of this war. Chiefly Kuwait, Qatar, and the Emirates. Bahrain to a lesser extent. Saudi Arabia perhaps to a lesser extent, and Oman is doing the best amongst them, although Mr. Trump, if the Omanis don't behave, Mr. Trump is ready to blow it up. Is this a new definition of mediocrity? I'll leave that up to you. But it seems to me that the Arab Gulf states are now confronted with a dilemma. The dilemma is this: do they reformulate their security priorities and refocus on their long-term economic projects? As I'm sure you know, Saudi Arabia has canceled dozens and dozens of projects, whether it's in NEOM, in the eastern province, or elsewhere, simply because the money is going elsewhere. The money is going for security priorities for the time being. And there is another very important point, and I asked this question to Professor Cooley yesterday. The conservative Arab Gulf monarchies have a vision that is very different from the rest of the Arab world. In fact, there is this huge division now that has emerged in the Arab world. Why that occurred is due to the fact that the traditional nationalist, Nasserist vision of the Arab world has failed. Nasserism is one of the most wonderful failures in the history of mankind. Promises all kinds of things and delivers zilch. The conservative Arab Gulf monarchies don't want to go that way. They want to develop, they want to be friends with everybody, they don't want to be enemies with Iran, they don't want to be enemies with Russia, with Azerbaijan, with Armenia, with China, with the United States, with Europe. They want to have their own role to play in the world. Now, the question is, can they do this? Is it realistic on their part? Why am I asking this question? Because they are very small populations, even though they have, relatively speaking, financial capabilities, but those are not limitless. There are limits to all your financial capabilities as well. And your population is not there. You're still very much dependent on outsiders for what matters. And what matters is security. What matters is security. In Arabic, we say نقطع السطر. Point à la ligne en français. This is security dilemma. And they're suffering now. We'll have to wait and see whether they will be able to manage to continue their vision And they want to be friends, as I said, with everybody. But it takes two to tango. You cannot tango alone. I mean, you could, but I think it's tough.
Yes, thank you. Is this working? Yeah. So I will start with Dr. Akhtar. You mentioned that the pan-Turkism is not there anymore. Well, I think it is there. Pan-Turkism. Yeah, I think it is there. Why? Because I think Turkey is in dire situation now, and you know that. Yesterday, by the way, they sold 9 of 10 bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds. Yesterday they sold it, yeah. So pan-Turkism will be used as a tool to expand their influence to the Central Asia, etc., to have new markets and stuff, because they have lost a lot. One critical evidence of that is the following. When the Karabakh War ended, Turkish defense minister visited Azerbaijan and he met the Karabakh defense minister. Do you know what the gift that he handled to the Azeri defense minister? Do you know what was it? Yeah. Do you know what was it?
And
The
where's
audience.
picture?
Do you know what was it, audience? It was the shield of a conqueror given to during the Ottoman Empire, as if thanking them to conquer, new lands. Now, if anyone in this court says that it was not a new land, it is, preserving the territorial integrity, well, kindly reminder why we don't think of territorial integrity of Cyprus, for example, from time to time. And yes, the question is, do you think the pan-Turkism is kind of raison d'etre for the Turkish government, if you please?
If I may,
Yeah. Can I add the second question for Mr. Dr. Keshishian, with whom I agree 100%, because we are both Lebanese, it seems. But the thing is, the TRIPP. Yeah, I know that the TRIPP has not economic weight. Because the middle corridor and the northern corridor are much more economically feasible. And this is it's a fact, right? But I think yesterday that was mentioned as well. It is political bridge rather than economical bridge. Where? My question is, do you think that Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will not be pleased by this bridge? Not because of the economical factor of this TRIPP thing, because they have a lot, which is this thing is like peanuts for what they have. Because of the rivalry between Turkey and Saudi Arabia to lead the Arab Muslim world, particularly the Sunni world, and you know that. Do you think they might be interested in sabotaging this TRIPP road in order not to give Turkey a mark, you know what I mean? A gain, whatever it is. All right? Do you think so? Thank you so much.
If I may, Cengiz, again, because I happen to know a little bit, and it's the issue is addressed to you, but it follows up on what Mr. Kehian said. One of the characteristics of Turkey, so far as I am concerned, is its ability to have a kind of a multifaceted identity. At some point, it was European. Then came Yeni Osmanlılık, New Ottomanism. Then came Türk Dünyası. Underneath, there is one of the key principles in the early 20th century, Islamcılık. that is the struggle for the leadership of the Sunni world also is part of the identity of Turkey, and its ability to play on, on every direction. So I wanted to just throw this comment, which you know better than I, just in case you wish to elaborate on it,
I mean, to start with this pan-Turkism, I mean, in order to sell goods to Central Asia, you don't need to be a pan-Turkist, It's, I mean, it's it may help, but I mean, it's I mean, the Kazakhs and the Kyrgyz and the others won't buy your biscuits because you are Turkish. I don't think so. I mean, they will buy the cheapest one, and the more the best when it comes to the quality price ratio. Frankly, this pan-Turkism, as I said in my talk, the pan-Turkism is a very short-lived theory which emerged in the late 19th century, beginning 20th, at the time of the invention of the Turkish nation. At the end of the day, this Turkish nation has been set up on the basis of the religion, not of the ethnicity. And this is why Turkey today is the most, religiously speaking, homogeneous country of the region. The annihilation of the non-Muslim populations of the Ottoman Empire is directly related to the invention of the Turkish nation, and the very foundation of it, the cement of it, was Islam, not Turkishness. Because the Kurds were part of it, and all these small nations from the Caucasus and from the Balkans, they were all part of it, and their common ground was Islam, not Turkishness. They were not even speaking Turkish, So pan-Turkism, it's a short-lived adventure invented by some, dangerous mavericks. They killed a lot of people, and they caused the death of a lot of people, particularly in the Caucasus, and also partly in Central Asia. And Ver got killed in Central Asia, as you know. And that's all. And again, Turkey today, I repeat, I mean, pan-Turkism is not an issue. It's not part of the political debate in Turkey. The people don't accuse each other by saying, "Are you pan-Turkish or pan-Turkic or whatever or not?" There's no such a debate in Turkey. It's something which it's food for the others, actually, to think that the pan-Turkism. Frankly, it's a non-issue in Turkey. And it's more, when it comes to Sunni Islam, definitely, this is something else. Turkey actually was given a kind of mission by the West to normalize, to civilize, the Muslim Middle East, and to become a kind of, role model for these countries. Instead of normalizing Muslim Brotherhood, it has become itself a country run by Muslim Brotherhood, That's something else. And then in connection with the question to Dr. Keşişyan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they are not challengers, it comes and goes. And in terms of religion, frankly, Turkish influence is very, I would say, artificial. There is not one single Turkish scholar in the world which can pretend to be a Muslim scholar. Doesn't exist. And the reason is probably due to the fact that was because there was a harsh Westernization beginning 19th century, and Turkey is not I would say is not a source. Is not a source country. It's not a model country when it comes to the Islamic fiqh, at all. I mean, there's no such a thing. It's very, very Turkish Islam is very artificial and very superficial. So it's. Please.
I will pick up where you left off. I remember a few years ago at a conference in Riyadh on King Faisal. As some of you know, I've written a book on King Faisal, who was assassinated, unfortunately, the poor guy. So this Turkish scholar was invited to be part of the conference as well. And unfortunately, he spoke neither Arabic nor English. He spoke in Turkish. Fortunately, I was there, so I interpreted for him from the Turkish to the Arabic. And over the years, we've invited quite a few scholars from Turkey to come and visit us. And regrettably, there are very few that accepted the invitation. So Professor Asturian should not feel all that bad if the Uzbeks have boycotted him. The same thing occurs elsewhere as well. But I'm gonna really, your question is really pertinent, and I want to really address this in a theoretical way first, and then in a practical way second. I agree with you that TRIPP is a political project. It is not an economic project primarily, but let's start from the back. Let's start from the economics. Capitalism was not invented in the West, neither on the banks of the Potomac, nor the Thames, nor the Seine River in Paris. Capitalism was invented in the Middle East, in the Arab world. The original capitalists are the Muslims, and even before Muslims, they are the real capitalists. Money means something, and investment means something in this part of the world. Therefore, whatever projects are available, they will talk, they will entertain, but the priority will always be the beneficiary aspects of this project. The southern maritime routes, as I have said in my presentation, are the cheapest available alternatives to both the northern as well as the middle corridors right now. Now, as I've said, wars will end, and eventually real capitalists, those who really value money, and those who don't know how to invest, it reminds me of a story that I want to share with you. The Financial Times of London has a monthly supplement. The title of the supplement is How to Spend Money. How to spend it. That's the title of the supplement. Making money is easy. Spending it is different and difficult. So therefore, this is the theoretical part. They will go for the cheapest option, and eventually the maritime routes will take over, because a container that is going to cost $1,500 to transport from China to Europe, nobody's going to pay $5,000 for it when they can afford to pay $1,500. Politically, and your question is very pertinent. Mr. Trump, who is our president, I apologize. Mr. Trump is in the business of making peace. A piece of Armenia, a piece of Azerbaijan, a piece of Syria, a piece of Lebanon, a piece of whatever. This is a piece of Russia, a piece of Ukraine, a piece of everything. And Iran as well. Although I have my doubts about all of this theater that is underway right now. We'll just have to wait and see. He wants to put his name on everything. So therefore, it is political for that reason. And the funny part, of course, is that these projects are moving so slowly, that it will take several Trump administrations. Maybe he wants to stay in power until 28, 32, 36. You know, maybe he wants to be president when he's 100 years old. We'll have to wait and see. So don't be too harsh. Be patient. It will only take 8,888 years, and everything will be fine.
Join our line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. Yes. I have. Okay. That's fine.
And he needs to be online as a first speaker of
we'll follow your lead. Yes, thank you very much. I have one question to, actually two questions, interlinked questions for Dr. Keshishan. You mentioned security dilemma, yeah, facing the Gulf monarchies. What options do you think could be on the table to address the security dilemma post-war? And you mentioned kind of shifting from detente to deterrence and pressure on Iran, right? What about Israel? Is there a possibility of sort of shared approach, or that will be kind of maybe the biggest line of division in the Gulf?
Very shortly, very briefly, the King of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, through his son, the heir apparent Mohammed bin Salman, has practically answered this question. He said Saudi Arabia will have diplomatic relations with Israel after there is an independent Palestinian state. You cannot be clearer than that. If there is an independent Palestinian state established, or at least a possibility that a Palestinian state will be created, we, Saudi Arabia, he said, will establish diplomatic relations. And there is a realism, as I've said in my talk, to reconcile, because they want to step away from the failed policies of the past. They want to have good relations. Israel is an important country in the region. They recognize that. But they don't accept what happened in Gaza with 100,000 people killed and nobody lifts a finger. It's crocodile tears left and right, as if these 100,000 people who were killed are not human beings. And why are they being killed? What have they done? Okay, there was a massacre of October 7th. I understand 1,500 people were killed and tortured, etc. But there is something called proportionality. If I kill 1,500 or 1,700 people of your population and you retaliate by annihilating 100,000 of mine, what happens to proportionality here? What is the justice here? That's one issue. So the Saudis are clear on this prospect. With the other options that they have on the table, again, because of time limitations, Saudi Arabia will not have any problems with reconciling with Iran down the line. Iran is a Muslim country, even though it's a Shia society, and in fact, earlier we were talking about the fact that the Turkish model of Islam and so on, Saudi Arabia is not in a competition with Turkey over Islam, because there is only one Muslim leader in the world, and that's Saudi Arabia. Make no mistake about that. Mecca and Medina are not in Istanbul. Mecca and Medina are in Saudi Arabia, even though the Israelis consider Mecca and Medina to be theirs, and they would like to conquer it. Not the Turks. The Turks, as far as I know, the Turks have never said we're going to conquer Mecca and Medina. But the Israelis have said that.
But I'm more curious about the Saudi and Iraqi division.
The South. Well, again, that's a... Now, you're asking me a very sensitive question, and I have to be very diplomatic when I answer this question. In very brief terms, the Emiratis have made a decision with the Abraham Accords to balance or to play, if you would like, a game. We're talking about the great game here. The Emirati leader, Mohammed bin Zayed, is playing the game of balancing his American relationships with the Arab world. And he thinks that by having Israel on his side, that he could actually become the leader of the Arab world. Sheikh Zayed is turning in his grave right now, seeing what his children are doing. I have personally met Sheikh Zayed. I know what kind of a man he was. And he is flipping in his grave on a daily basis. He's becoming a shish kebab, literally. And that's the reality. Mohammed bin Zayed is wedging. He wants to play one against the other. Saudis will not play that game. They will not play that game.
Just final a few comments. It was I spent about 2 months and a half trying to invite a very good person from Uzbekistan. It was endless delays until I set a deadline. They wanted even more time. I told them then we are done now. The next day they said they had another ambassador who was ready to come, but I was not ready to invite at that point, so that took care of that one. There was yesterday a comment about why isn't there an Azerbaijani expert here. I have the answer for that one. I have met with a few of them. I get my information about what Azerbaijan wants from President Ilham Aliyev, Mr. Elchin Amirbayov, and Mr. Hajiev, and a bit behind them, Foreign Minister Bayramov. I don't need people who basically yesterday were going to tell me we are at war. Today they are going to tell me we are at peace. Tomorrow they are going to say, it's not total peace. So I don't need parrots. There is no freedom whatsoever. These people have no ability or courage to say anything because they will go to jail. I mean, the field has been wiped out in Azerbaijan. Wiped out. If you don't know it, do some research. The few people who can express some independent thought are either in prison and for a very long time, even people who have said almost nothing. There is a young guy, Samad, the guy is he's not an opponent, he doesn't have a group, he has nothing. He's in jail, he's rotting there. The few left are fled all over the place in Europe, essentially, some even facing assassination, including in France, by the way. So I don't view it as useful. If I could invite the people I have named, Elchin Amirbayov and so on, but I don't have that status. I would do it, rest assured, I would do it with pleasure, because I would know that what they are saying carries weight, okay? But no parrots. A small comment about one dimension of Turkey, about which, again, Dr. Akhtar knows much more. And in passing, he said something. You know, there is the visible economy. And then there is strong evidence of massive hidden circulation. For example, drugs, drug trafficking, contacts between mafia and state. The first sign of it was the Susurluk incident a long time ago. There is a hidden face of the system there, which is very difficult to decipher. There are people doing good work on specific aspects of that, but you should know that it's a very complicated reality. Final point about Iran, and then I hope you have time to have lunch. You know, up until the war, the attack against Iran, one of the key characteristics, so far as one could tell, of Iranian foreign policy was that, as they say in political science, Iran was not, like many states, was not a unitary actor in foreign relations. You know, it had bureaucratic politics, different wings in the system, and not just different ministries, but also different ideological inclinations and so on. And at some point, a synthesis was reached, probably at the very top under the Ayatollah, I don't know, okay? But there were different opinions very clearly expressing themselves. As a result of the war and the assassinations that have taken place of the leadership, at this point, I don't know how the system functions. Okay, I don't have any evidence, but you should know that it's also a very complicated reality. Okay, I think we are gonna start. So as we saw in the previous session, everything is going smoothly, everything is fine in Eurasia and around Eurasia. I am sure this will be corroborated in this session. So we are again moving a little bit away from Armenia itself and taking a look at the crucial players, Kazakhstan. There aren't many specialists of Turkmenistan, I must confess, in the universe, you know. We have also guests from Kazakhstan there. I mentioned that I made every single effort possible to bring somebody from Uzbekistan, but it's a systemic thing. It's not boycott or anything like that. There is nothing aimed at undermining the conference. I think it had to do with a process of decision making, and unfortunately, I couldn't bring specialists from there. So I will shut up now. You have all the details about the participants, and I am grateful to Dr. Sahagian for accepting to be the moderator of this session.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Let's fly to Central Asia, and thank you for tickets to Professor Asturian, who provided these tickets to Central Asia. It is the region where great power competition is going on. There is Russia, still very strong. It has its political, economic, cultural influence. There is China, which is advancing through its Belt and Road geostrategy towards this region. Of course, the United States is also trying to come back after the withdrawal from the Afghanistan. We have here Turkey, India, and our players, but there is also need to mention that states in this region are also have their own sovereignty, and they are struggling for their agency and for the balancing with these old great powers. So it is my honor to present you Dr. Nargis Kasenova, who is one of the best scholars in this field in Central Asia. I am also reading her works and citing her works on Central Asia and China. She is from Kazakhstan, but she went global, and now she is from the Davis Center, Harvard University. Dr. Kasenova, it is our honor that you are here. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here. This is my first visit to Armenia. I hope that there will be more. In the future. And okay, without further ado, let me start my presentation by saying that the geopolitical fluidity of the current moment is truly remarkable, and there is no need to elaborate this point. That's what we've been discussing over the past 2 days. The countries of Central Asia and the South Caucasus and elsewhere are facing an urgent need to process the implications of ongoing changes, trying to grasp trends and reposition themselves for the new emerging order. And yesterday, Professor Asturian launched this conference by recalling the 1930s. Since the theme of this conference is inspired by Halford Mackinder, let me add an earlier decade. The fluidity and high stakes of difficult choices that need to be made today are reminiscent of the moments captured and analyzed in Mackinder's works. He wrote The Geographical Pivot of History in 1904, at the time when the British dominance was challenged by Germany and Russia, and states in Europe and elsewhere had to react and make their bets. He published Democratic Ideals and Reality, a study in the politics of reconstruction in the aftermath of World War I, thinking how to organize stable peace and prevent re-emergence of Germany as a formidable rival with a competing organization, quote unquote, or in the text he refers to it as growing concern. Now it is China that is offering a different organization, while the US is drastically changing its own. Mackinder developed a framework focusing on resources, mobility, and, well, the term we use today is connectivity, and great power competition, which has been most useful for understanding developments in and around Central Asia, since the 5 countries of the region became independent in 1991. And, well, great power is one cliche that is used all the time. Heartland is another one that you can come across quite often. In this paper that I'm presenting today, I'm applying Mackinder's framework in order to reflect on today's Central Asia in the context of China's rise as a Eurasian power and global superpower, and the current moment of geopolitical fluidity and uncertainty triggered by drastic changes in the US foreign policy under the second Trump administration. First, I use his method of combining geography and history while paying special attention to mobility, technology, and organization to define a larger trend of Central Asia's reconnecting to Asia after decades of being integrated into the Soviet Union and cut off from its neighborhood. Second, I build on his insight about small states in between, the expanding and competing great powers as a starting point for reflections on the multi-vector foreign policies of Central Asian countries as ways to retain sovereignty and ongoing regionalization processes that can potentially help Central Asia play a role similar to that of the ASEAN region in the international system. And finally, I emphasize how his worldview of the international system as a dangerous place strongly resonates with the precarious moment we find ourselves in today. So first point, Central Asia's return to Asia. At the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Central Asia functioned as a remote periphery of Europe. In fact, there was no Central Asia, but Kazakhstan and 4 Middle Asian republics, Kazakhstan and Srednja Asia, composed of Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. So all major roads, railways, and pipelines were leading north to Russia. As units of the former Soviet Union, the 5 newly independent states were included in the Euro-Atlantic Security Organization's institutions, Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe, that transformed into OSCE in 1995, and the NATO Partnership for Peace program. While the countries identified themselves with Asia, they inherited Russia-centric worldview and also narratives. During the Soviet period, the Asianness of the region was generally associated with backwardness. Contacts with other Asian countries were either very limited and mediated and controlled by Moscow, in case of friendly India or members of the socialist camp, such as Vietnam, or simply blocked. Thus, the border with China was sealed between the 1960s and the mid-1980s. The Soviet intervention in Afghanistan created linkages, but also devastated that country. The liberalization reforms initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev created more room for reflections on ethnic and religious identity and for republics to engage in modest interactions with foreign countries and companies. Once the Soviet Union collapsed, they could immediately grasp an opportunity to develop relations with Asian countries, and first of all with neighboring China. The success of Asian modernization projects and the fact that they could be accomplished without outright westernization and loss of traditions made these connections even more appealing. Central Asian government officials made trips to China, South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia, trying to learn what they did and how. And the attraction was mutual. Japan, as a leading Asian power, felt a responsibility to bring newly independent Central Asian countries into the international community. Tokyo pushed for their inclusion on the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development list of countries eligible for official development assistance and their membership in the Asian Development Bank. For South Korea, Central Asia was important because of a large diaspora. 500,000 ethnic Koreans settled there as a result of mass deportations of unreliable people by Stalin. Reattaching itself to Asia at the identity ideational level was easier than doing it materially. That is, developing transport links and trade was a major challenge for the landlocked region. Over the 3 decades of independence, drawing on mutual interest, China and Central Asian countries developed a railway, road, air travel, and oil and gas pipeline connections. Kazakhstan became the linchpin of China's Silk Road economic belt, announced by President Xi in Astana in 2013, and later transformed, as we know, into the Belt and Road Initiative, which is now global. Chinese and Kazakh companies co-own terminals along the route, from the Lianyungang port on the east coast of China to the Aktau port on the Kazakhstan side of the Caspian Sea. Since 2009, Korean Air manages air cargo at the Navoid dry port in Uzbekistan. South Korea has also become a recipient of Central Asian labor, creating kind of small alternative to Russia. The southern direction toward India and Pakistan has proven to be more difficult due to the security situation in Afghanistan. Over the past years, however, Uzbekistan has been actively developing good neighborly ties and transport connections with Afghanistan. Connecting to Asia and positioning itself in Asia in the security sphere is an ongoing process as well. Kazakhstan, located both in Europe and in Asia, felt a particular need to find a formula for linking the two security systems. The much more structured European security, well, now it's in a bit of a disarray, and the looser Asian. In October 1992, Kazakhstan's President Nursultan Nazarbayev proposed to create a conference for interaction and confidence building in Asia, modeled after the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. Importantly, China and other Asian states supported the idea, and the SICA, that's the abbreviation of the organization, founding conference took place in Almaty in 1992. On the other side, Kazakhstan has been pushing the OSCE for a shared framework of the Euro-Atlantic and Eurasian security, with Afghanistan being a focal point, and enhancing cooperation with Asian partners. And the highlight of these efforts was the Astana Declaration, adopted by the OSCE summit in 2010, stating that the security of the OSCE area is inextricably linked to that of adjacent areas, notably in the Mediterranean and in Asia. In the meantime, Uzbekistan has been focusing on Central Asian security. Under President Islam Karimov, the approach was to fortify the country's borders and defenses and help to stabilize Afghanistan. Under current President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, who has been in power since 2017, Tashkent has retained their regional focus, but made a very significant shift from tough to friendly, from closed militarized borders to active diplomacy, dispute resolution, and open trade. Internationally, the Uzbek government has been pushing for normalization of relations with the Taliban government of Afghanistan. That's somewhat similar to Germany and France. In the EU, Kazakhstan actively works on the east-west axis, and Uzbekistan emphasizes the southern direction. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are relatively small states, and the organizational capacity beyond the borders of the region is limited. It's more feasible for Central Asian states to be on board with security projects shaped by great powers, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that we'll hear about later today. Delhi brought the 5 Central Asian states into a regional security dialogue on Afghanistan. And both China and India have well-developed bilateral military security cooperation with Central Asian states. As for the US allied Asian powers, Japan and South Korea, they tend to focus on softer security issues in the cooperation with their Central Asian partners. As for the US itself, it established military cooperation with the countries of the region in the early years of independence. Despite ebbs and flows and Russia's pressure, it's still alive. It's very small scale, but it's there. Japan, South Korea, and India are increasingly engaging with Central Asia through the C5 plus one format, which is 5 Central Asian states plus an external partner. And I think it's worth noting that it was Japan that first initiated that format in 2004. South Korea launched its Korea Central Asia Cooperation Forum 2007, followed by India, establishing its C5+1 dialogue in 2019. And this format allows external powers to support regional cooperation and Central Asia's budding strategic autonomy vis-à-vis China, that plays a dominant role as the region's connected to Asia and organizer of multilateral frameworks. And here let me just note that both the Russia-Ukraine war and the ongoing war in the Middle East only strengthen this trend, because, you know, if you look kind of at Central Asia and the areas around, this connection to China and Asia is the kind of, that's where the stability is. Now, Central Asia is a place in between. Central Asia has a multi-layered identity. It is Asian, it is Eurasian, it's post-Soviet, it is Muslim, and it is Turkic-Persian. The region shares multiple affinities with neighbors and some countries and regions further away. And the recovery of sovereignty in 1991 allowed the newly independent Central Asian countries to tap into these identities and build their multi-vector foreign policies. One principal goal of such a policy, if not the principal goal, is to reduce and mitigate the traditional hold of Russia on their affairs. With China's rise as an economic and political powerhouse, they are now finding themselves squeezed in between these two giants. And such a situation carries resemblance to that of East Europe, as described by Mackinder. Analysts of Central Asia as Heartland often forget or underplay that it was East Europe that was the main focus and place of action in Mackinder's theory. He argued that to prevent the rise of a new Eurasian hegemon in the form of Russia-Germany alliance, it was imperative to ensure the independence of East European countries squeezed in between Germany and Russia. And here, let me just quickly read the quotation from Mackinder. Unless you would lay up trouble for the future, you cannot now accept any outcome of the war which does not finally dispose of the issue between German and Slav in East Europe. You must have a balance as between German and Slav, and true independence of each. You cannot afford to leave such a condition of affairs in East Europe and the Heartland as would offer scope for ambition in the future, for you have escaped too narrowly from the recent danger. Importantly, the countries of the region, Eastern European countries themselves were determined to stay independent from Germany and Russia, and as Mackinder wrote, Germany and Russia have grown into great empires out of opposition to one another. But the peoples of the middle tier, Poles, Bohemians, Hungarians, Romanians, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks, are much too unlike to federate for any purpose except defense. Yet they're all so different, both from Germans and Russians, that they may be trusted to resist any new organization of either great neighbor making towards the empire of East Europe. Echoing Mackinder, I would argue that the countries of Central Asia feel different from Russia and China, and they can be trusted to softly resist the full domination by these big neighbors. Although Central Asian states cannot project much power, they can play an important role in keeping the equilibrium. They're skilled at balancing and calibrating relations with great powers. If they're not pushed to make choices, they will continue with their hedging approach. Since 2017, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan have been pushing for more regional cooperation, cohesion, and connectivity. And, as you know, 5 Central Asian presidents hold annual consultative meetings
to steer the process, adopt joint initiatives and roadmaps. Disputes are resolved, and ties across the board are deepening. With regional cooperation processes successfully underway, the role of Central Asia international system is growing more similar to that of the ASEAN, a diverse but coordinated grouping open for trade and cooperation and willing and able to provide amortization to tensions between great powers. Finally, precarious moment. The worldview and mood of Mackinder's writings resonates well with the current precarious moment. The world of international politics is a dangerous place, with high prices to pay for failure to escape danger or hubris. His account of European history and politics in democratic ideas and reality features multiple stories of policy mistakes leading to dramatic outcomes. The famous saying, "Who rules East Europe commands the heartland, who rules the heartland commands the world island, who rules the world island commands the world," was to be whispered to British statesmen when they were growing too confident. The way to reminder of mortality was whispered to a victorious Roman general when he entered the city amid the head-turning splendor of a triumph. This is not a call for capturing East Europe, but a poetic warning of hubris. The big powers fall prey to hubris, they overstretch. Knowing, recognizing one's boundaries is extremely difficult. Russia miscalculated when it attacked Ukraine in 2022, expecting it to fall within weeks and to hold a victory parade in Kiev, and also underestimating the West's resolve. There is a possibility that it will miscalculate again, counting on the West's disarray. The US under the second Trump administration is also driven by hubris, of thinking that its comprehensive strength can make everybody bow to its will, that it can be at the top of the system alone. China might think it has enough capacity to take over Taiwan. Compared to Moscow and Washington, Beijing is prudent and tends to prefer softer methods, but might also assume the window of opportunity to take bold action is now. Mackinder would almost certainly disapprove of Washington's current attempts to shed Europe and Eurasia, the heartland, as a dangerously folly, triggering a series of negative outcomes. He would probably be satisfied as an analyst that he predicted the potentiality of China's rise as a Eurasian hegemon. And here's a quotation, adding the oceanic frontage to the resources of the great continent. And then again the quotation, the yellow peril to the world's freedom, as he described it. Mackinder would be likely to reflect on the competing organizations or growing concerns of China, the United States, the EU, and others, and recognize the constructive and stabilizing agency of nation states that became independent and strengthened themselves over the past decades. And yesterday, Dr. Kapan told us that strategic neutrality and diversification of partnerships is the best bet for Armenia and the South Caucasus. I can say the same about Central Asia. Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries have been hedging over the past 3 decades and should continue to do so. And this balancing act is not only good for us, but it contributes to stabilizing the international system. It is not an easy game, it is a risky game. We can be negatively affected and even destroyed by great power rivalries. However, if we are organized and prudent, hopefully we can weather the storm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very interesting speech. And dear colleagues, let me introduce you Dr. Slavomir Horak. He is also a well-known scholar. I'm also enjoying his works on Turkmenistan, citing his works. He is from Charles University in Prague. Dear colleague, please, the floor is yours.
Well, I prepared some presentation because I will present some figures and facts, so maybe it's fine to have it on your eyes. Actually, I brought to this topic, not this topic, but the general topic on, let's say, railways and railway geopolitics, first of all, being a fan of railways. I really like railways. I'm from the railway family, by the way. And a couple of years ago, I had some small presentation on this kind of railway geopolitics. Then I wrote the chapter to our European Handbook for Central Asian Studies on railway geopolitics of Central Asia, just a little bit more like kind of introduction with the historical parts. And like 3 years ago, I published the article on specifically on Turkmenistan and its place in this kind of railway geopolitical system. And basically today it's kind of update of that article, because this text was written apparently before February 2022. Just I had the chance to make small updates when the war broke, and actually I didn't have much time and place to develop that point better, so I will do it right now. Well, Nargis just talk about like this broad picture of geopolitics of Central Asia, bringing all different players. I will be a little bit different speaker, because speaking about, let's say, very narrow focus on Turkmenistan itself, on, let's say, provide you a kind of case study of what we basically have talked about up to now. We talk about different kinds of connectivities, railway corridors, railroads, political dimension, economic dimension, and so on. So let's try to think about what we have now, at least up to now, being in 2026, and focus on, let's say, results of this, all this like political talks and negotiations, focusing on one single country. I focus on Turkmenistan because it's the country that I have been studying for, I don't know, 25 or more years. So that's why I will bother you with this. But nevertheless, I could give you maybe to move down from this macro view to more micro view, looking from, let's say, one side. Of course, I will provide also some comparison between Turkmenistan and for example, Kazakhstan, because these two players are the key player on Central Asian side, based on speaking about South Caucasus corridor system. I don't speak about TRIPP only. I speak about I can speak about Azerbaijan, Georgia corridor, which is now in function as well. So what's the issue? We speak about Turkmenistan, usually speaking about Turkmenistan as a kind of very good chain on this corridor, or perspective chain on this corridor between China, Central Asia, Caucasus, Turkey, Europe, and further on. Oh, yeah? Now it's better? It's on, basically. I see the green light. Oh, can you hear me in this way? I try to be as loud as possible, but maybe. Usually my students complain about being loud in a small auditorium, so I hope I can deal with that. So usually speaking about Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, apparently, they are like one of the key players on these corridors. Of course. Here we could distinguish between the two issues, two corridors or two names of corridor. One is this middle corridor. We named it many times during these last 2 days, but much less attention was given to this southern corridor. Southern corridor, I mean that they have even two branches, so that's why I will present southern corridor like 1 and southern corridor 2. Please don't confuse that 1 or 2. One is more important, one's less important, but they are both somehow might be important, at least prospectively important. And what we could speak also about, it's kind of how these countries, like both Kazakhstan and especially Turkmenistan, approached this issue. Yesterday, I just forgot who talked about this hardware and software issues. So if you look, Central Asian states are very relatively successful, and some countries more, some countries less, in this hardware development. So you can see the state of the railways at the end of the Soviet period, then just before the war, and recently for this presentation I went back to OSGD statistics and provide recent ones. So you can see that in some cases we see very high growth of this hardware infrastructure, and the highest rate or highest percentage is in Turkmen case. If you just move it to the map, so you can see quite a lot of connections, like not only external ones, but mostly internal ones. Because you can see that, you know, that if we speak about speaking of railways in Central Asia, basically they were built during the pre-Soviet Russian Empire. Basically Turkmenistan was the first country or first land where railways was constructed in a even during the Russian campaign against Akhalteke region in 1881. So this basically, this first Trans-Caspian railway was the first like connection connecting the Russian center through Caspian Sea up to Krasnovodsk at that time, today Turkmenbashi, and at the end of the 19th century it reached Fergana Valley and Tashkent. And then just the current railway from Orenburg to Tashkent was built in 1906. So basically you have the first railway line built through today's Turkmen territory. But okay, during the Soviet times, you can see some add-ons, but these railways didn't respect very much the border, for obvious reasons. Basically, the borders were just simply administrative ones, and nobody cared about what kind of borders they cross, which became the big issue for all Central Asian countries, especially the Southern Tier. It's just Nargis defined them as Srednya Asia. It means these four countries. So very often the railways cross the borders between each other, and it was quite hard to get, I don't know, from Tashkent to Termes, because there was no railway bypassing the Turkmen territory. And the same with Turkmenistan. You can see that, for example, if you wanted to get, I remember when I was first time in Turkmenistan in 2001, taking the train from Ashgabat to Dashos. So I had today make a whole loop all around basically the whole country. Today you have some kind of connection, it's north-south connection. And of course, for speaking about geopolitics, we have several corridors, several railways that were built to connect Turkmenistan with the outside world. So basically, if you look at this hardware, you might expect that actually Turkmenistan will be very successful in promoting its territory for transit, for being having economic profit from that, having all, let's say, perspectives of being quite profitable country made if we speak about this freight cargo transit. But actually, if you look at the figures, it didn't help. It didn't happen. Just very few, just small side talk, some small brackets on Kazakhstan. You can see Kazakhstan Railways, just very rough scheme. But Kazakhstan Railways in 1991. And the same in 1995. So you can see that Kazakhstan was much more, let's say, successful to connect the country internally, one, and to create some kind of corridor stretching from one side of Central Asia, I mean Chinese-Kazakhstani border, to another side on Caspian Sea. So in this sense, despite relatively, just coming back to this picture, relatively small extension of railways made much more profit and much higher effect for Kazakhstan than for Turkmenistan, with its more than 80% of railway development, and even today it's even slightly more. Well, speaking about corridors, you can see that Turkmenistan might be basically a real cradle of corridors. I just point on a map two corridors with a southern corridor stretching into, or dividing, or forking into two branches. So the southern corridor one going down to Iran, which was basically built for the first time back in 1996. Don't forget that point, because it was at that time, it was considered as some kind of, let's say, a golden chain, a golden nail that connects East Asia with the Middle East, and now everything will be okay. I was in Sarax back in 2001, and then in 2013. And you might look that this huge terminal that was being built in Sarax on the Turkmen side of the border is mostly empty, mostly conserved, didn't use, despite the eventual very good perspective that it might have had. And then we have this southern corridor, let's say, too. That's most important, more important probably for the South Caucasus, stretching from throughout Turkmenistan through the Caspian Sea to the Caucasus and further on to the west. It's also not just the case of the southern corridor, it's a case of this northern corridor. Please take these lines as very rugged, but just to give you an idea of how Turkmenistan can really be a hub for Eurasian transport. Yeah. Okay, but let's go to the reality. First of all, before I will go to this slide, I will just show you that one. Here you have some kind of figures for all corridors. Just in the morning, we heard some kind of, let's say, skeptical approach for, let's say, all this like land corridors. So I have, and plus, it's skeptical vision of middle corridor versus the northern one. Here you can see some picture. If you look at it in 2021, just before the war started, you can see overwhelming majority of cargo going from, let's say, East Asia to Europe with any line was focused on this northern part. Just it looks very great as a great figures, but think that it's about some kind of 5%. Certainly not more than 10% of overall China-Europe transport. Yeah, so it's a very small, tiny effect. But nevertheless, the northern corridor overwhelmingly prevailed over anything else. If you look at figures from 2025, and please take them as a very rough and very, let's say, preliminary, some estimations, because we don't have exact figures. Actually, in this discipline of railway transport, surprisingly, we struggle with data collections. So basically, I collect all the data one by one from different articles, making somehow the average of them, because some articles, of course, very much exaggerate the points. Some statements of the politicians use some exaggerate figures prepared by their advisors or their ministries or whatever. So trying to somehow figure that out, I made some kind of, let's say, average figures. So anyway, need not to be absolutely correct. Especially speaking about Turkmenistan, any figures from Turkmenistan should be treated very cautiously. But nevertheless, it can give you some kind of picture. What's the picture? The picture is that we see a drop on this red line on the northern corridor, going down, and in 2024 and 25, this middle corridor transport even, let's say, overcame the northern corridor route. Now, what are the reasons and what are the issues? Of course, Russian full-scale invasion to Ukraine made this northern corridor theoretically less attractive. Theoretically, why I speak theoretically? Because I remember in 2022-3, I have still very, let's say, close contact with our Czech Railways cargo company, and dealing with different logistics throughout Central Asia or Eurasia continent. And I remember the question, okay, how can we get some loads, some trains with coal from Kazakhstan to Central Europe? We have this kind of demand. We want to satisfy that. I said, okay, and we don't want to do it through Russia because of sanctions, because of war, and because even of our somehow moral aspects. We met with that guy, I don't know, 2 months later or so, just having some coffee or beer, and I asked, what happened? He said, what do you think we did with this cargo, with these trains of coal from Kazakhstan to Central Europe? I said, okay, probably you moved it somehow from through Russia. Yes. Why? Because it was more effective, cheaper, and like cost effectivity was higher than pushing it through the Caspian Sea. It was 2022, 2023. Now we can see these figures for 24, 25. So logical question is, what happened in this time? Well, there are several issues happened. Definitely, despite the fact that in initial years of Russian full-scale war in Ukraine, Caspian Sea was really a kind of bottleneck. There were no enough vessels to move the cargo from one part of the Caspian Sea to another one. There was no, even on the Caucasian side, to push all this demand through the capacity of, let's say, Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. It was impossible. And of course, this has changed. This has changed in recent times. In 2024, Georgia finally accomplished its task and make the capacity of its railway from, I think, 5 times more, which is much better. Well, I have a friend of mine is also railway fan in Georgia, and he observes sometimes like the trains with his son, who is also fanatic of railway. So he told me, okay, sometimes we go to Rustavi or closer to Azerbaijani border to observe the trains passing by. And if in 2022-3, if you saw the train, like cargo train on this route, it was mostly with the oil being transported from Caspian Sea, like from Azerbaijan to Georgian ports. Now we can see much more freight cargoes in between, of course, these oil trains. So it has changed. There is like even visible change. Well, of course, they don't count these trains. They don't count how many trains pass by with how many containers. But nevertheless, on a first view, it's quite well visible. So this kind of diversification started. And of course, the question is why. And here is one of the answers. Here is there are some, again, somehow raw figures for Kazakhstani ports, Kurik and Aktau, and Turkmenbashi port. You can see very substantial increase of cargo going through Kazakhstani port, despite all the troubles it has. I don't say it's ideal. I don't say the Kurik and Aktau ports, they are absolutely great, and I think our colleague from Aktau can confirm that point. Actually, this is something that enhanced and stimulated the cargo transport through. And of course, it has to have several reasons. First of all, it's expansion of cargo, expansion of railway or port capacities in Kazakhstan. 1 point. Expansion of vessels going through Kazakhstan, between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. We can see, of course, some kind of, I would say, moderate increase in case of Turkmenbashi port. Of course, it's logical. Turkmenbashi port has also very substantial capacity. It was built as a huge, glorious, another enormous project of the former president Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, and currently the president, Turkmen #1. So he really launched this kind of Turkmenbashi project even long before the war in Ukraine, like full-scale war in Ukraine, long before US-Israeli attacks on Iran and so on. So logically, of course, Turkmenistan might even take more niche in this business than it has. But nevertheless, we can see just, let's say, moderate increase of that. Of course, moderate in the sense, the business, if they ask about going or pushing their cargo through Central Asia, Caspian Sea, Caucasus, etc., they think, okay, the two ports in Kazakhstan, they are already on the edge of this capacity. They can't, they barely can't accept more cargo than they do. Of course, there is another way through Turkmenistan, but there are some problems. Yeah, what are the differences between the two countries? One is really large-scale investments, but okay, Turkmenistan also underwent large-scale investments in its Turkmenbashi port. Kazakhstan expand the vessel fleets, yeah, definitely. And what's the even more important? They expand this kind of software that made the cargo going from Chinese borders through Kazakhstan, Caspian Sea, and Caucasus more efficiently. So that's one of the issues that Kazakhstan really was able to develop in cooperation, of course, with Azerbaijan, with Georgia, with Turkey. We have this kind of 4 countries alliance that focus on make the procedures more smooth. So through digitalization, custom procedures are mostly digitalized now. If you want to push through your cargo in this way, and plus, of course, all this coordination makes the transport more efficient than this. And of course, it makes this kind of, let's say, software made this Kazakhstani route, middle corridor as we can call it, more predictability in terms of time, in terms of schedules, in terms of delays or less delays than in Turkmen case. While we see, and what we see in Turkmenistan, Turkmenistan has a huge potential, having the port that can deal with quite a lot of cargo. But at the same time, I just put you one issue. This is very interesting. I just at yesterday this table, especially this table down. This is the schedule of freight trains going through Turkmenistan. I have, if you like, I have more complete schedule dealing with all or covering all directions. But this is something that it's more the most interesting for us. Well, you have 3 days to cross all Turkmenistan. And plus, if you want to push through the cargo through Turkmenistan, you have to add more days to Uzbekistan. Not speaking about Kazakhstan. If you want to go or send your cargo from China through Central Asia with this southern corridor number 2. So it really creates a barrier for Turkmenistan, and make Turkmenistan basically very incompetitive vis-a-vis Kazakhstan and even Uzbekistan. Here you can see the average speed without delays on the borders. Average speed, just push the train through the country. So you may just count how much time does it take for train going from, for example, Khorgos to Aktau. And of course, in terms of transport cost, we are also somehow more competitive, but not as much as. Unfortunately, I have just figures from this 2019, but I don't think that there are substantial changes in that. So just for your information. But of course, these two figures or two tables might show you how Turkmenistan is incompetitive and ineffective vis-a-vis its main competitor in Central Asia. So just to summarize the issue, in the last 4 or 5 years, we might see, first of all, this initial setting, very marginal route between China and Caspian Sea, not used very much because it was not very efficient. Cost efficiency was very high vis-a-vis its competitors in the northern corridor. It continued at least up to 2022, somehow 23. In 2024, as Georgia increased its, let's say, capacity of its railway down to cars, and we can see visibly, we can see more trains going through, like cargo trains. We can see some changes in this sense, of course, not skipping this northern route at all, but nevertheless, plus there is software agreements on a smooth transport custom procedures or so, which we can see in case of Kazakhstan and other Caucasus countries, in this case Azerbaijan and Georgia, and we don't see that point in case of Southern Corridor 2. And of course, somehow I'm really wondering, and I don't have these figures right now, but I'm really wondering about the figures for this year. And this is a big question, because, well, even if we saw very high increase in this figure or in this graph on that one, it's very questionable whether we didn't reach some kind of peak, some border. Because if you look at the capacity of Azerbaijani/Georgian railways, we can't count on more cargo, more trains pushing through. Now this corridor works on its highest capacity. And if we speak about let's say the perspective and talks on so-called TRIPP corridor, well, in this case, it's very good, might be a good project that can technically, very purely technically, push, let's say somehow, make this corridor more viable, I mean, corridor through whole Caucasus, and help and add on the capacity towards vis-a-vis the Georgian one. So in this case, Georgia need not to be the competitor. It can be a very complement issue. Based on these figures, demand is here, and if you make the procedures relatively smooth, it can satisfy this kind of demand. But at the same time, we know that this corridor is, of course, still somewhere in heaven, but nevertheless, we can see the reaching the capacity of the corridor through Caucasus. So the figures for 26 will be quite interesting. So speaking about the conclusions, yes, we can see Kazakhstan, what I can call logistic advantage in the last 2 or 3 years, middle corridor expansion, but with a limit probably reaching its border, and structure problems on Turkmenistan side that doesn't enable to win over Kazakhstan competitor. So here we can see, that's why we can see this still widening gap between Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. Despite this fact, that figures on that graph shows us the growing disperse of the East Asia, if I can call it in this way, Europe cargo in the sense, and middle corridor, and to some extent even the southern corridor to Turkmenistan play some role. And it opens actually the way for application and making the changes on the Caucasian side as well. So thank you.